on.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. Ukraine says it will begin high-level consultations with the United States and Switzerland on ending Russia's war. Security Chief Rustem Umerov says both sides will discuss possible parameters for a future peace deal. US officials and lawmakers are raising alarms over a Miami meeting where Trump envoys, including Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, held talks with sanctioned Russian representative Kirill Dmitriev. Sources say the discussions focused on a draft Ukraine peace plan, prompting questions about contact with a blacklisted Moscow official. The US and China have held 3 days of maritime security talks in Hawaii. Both sides call the meetings frank and constructive as military contacts reopen. Marjorie Taylor Greene says she is resigning after a bitter clash with President Trump. He recently labelled her a traitor, calling her exit good news. An independent BBC board member has resigned after the broadcaster admitted to an incorrect edit of a Donald Trump speech. His departure comes as the BBC faces a $5 billion lawsuit and just weeks before his term was due to end. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says he held a good and confidential call with President Trump about the US peace plan for Ukraine. He said they agreed on the next steps and that he will now brief European partners. US President Donald Trump terminates temporary deportation protections for Somalis living in Minnesota, accelerating the end of the program that began in 1991. Amid the escalating tensions between Venezuela and the United States, the US FAA warns major airlines of a potentially hazardous situation when flying over Venezuela and has urged the civilian flights to exercise caution. We now move on, and a US peace proposal for ending the Russia-Ukraine war has raised concerns after reports that Trump officials met with a Russian envoy in Miami last month. The 28-point plan, reportedly drafted by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner with Dmitry Kirov, calls for Ukraine to cede parts of Donetsk, limit its military and pledge not to join NATO. Proposals Kiev has previously rejected. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he is ready to work with the US on their vision, but emphasized that Ukraine seeks a worthy peace, respecting its sovereignty. The plan has been criticized for appearing heavily tilted towards Moscow, while US officials insist Ukraine was consulted and that the proposal offers security guarantees and economic initiatives for both sides. Concerns have also been raised within the US administration and intelligence community about Dmitriev, who is under US sanctions, meeting directly with Trump officials. Critics argue the proposal could favor Russian interests and bypass interagency review. The White House stressed the plan is intended to achieve a durable win-win scenario and indicated that discussions with Ukraine will continue, while Zelensky is expected to discuss the proposals with Trump in the coming days. We're now joined by Raymond Vickery. He's an international affairs expert and former US Assistant Secretary of Commerce. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. Raymond, it's always a pleasure to talk to you here on NewsX World. Could I get your initial thoughts on this peace agreement? Of course, it was reportedly drafted by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, in the presence of reportedly as well a US-sanctioned Moscow envoy. Your thoughts on that, and its critics say tilting towards Moscow's favour?
Well, Thomas, thanks very much for having me and allowing me to comment on this.
Mm.
I think it's very laudable that President Trump has kept in the forefront the desire to bring peace rather than any kind of aggrandizement for the United States. That having been said, peace like war has to be waged, and that means you have to have a strategy, you have to have principles on which the peace will be founded, and you have to have partners. Unfortunately, it seems to me that this strong arming of Zelensky and Ukraine is contrary to that. It is really a throwback to the real estate deal approach, the transactional approach, which has characterized the Trump administration from the very beginning. The problem is that one, you have to stop the killing, but two, you have to have something which is durable and has principles to it. The Russian invasion of Ukraine was the worst transgression of the principles of non-invasion enshrined in the United Nations Charter since it was put into effect some 80 years ago. And this plan seems to reward the use of violence, the use of invasion by giving property which is not even controlled now by Russia in the Donbass. Further, the demands of Russia that Ukraine really be neutered as a military force are really contrary to building a strong and durable peace. You know, before World War II, Chamberlain went to Munich and came home with an agreement saying that there would be peace in our time. And everybody thought that was laudable, but it wasn't peace, it was really appeasement. So this is a very difficult situation. It's one which is fraught with grave danger, not just for the immediate situation, but what happens in the future, not only in Europe, but in Asia and across the world. You have to have some principles. You have to have a strategy for peace. You have to have partners. It can't be just a real estate deal in which particularly you're dealing with people who are already sanctioned.
Yeah, of course. The US has called this a deal that's sweet for both sides. However, of course, there's huge concerns over this, particularly the territorial integrity of Ukraine, which previously Donald Trump has said that it can maintain all the territory that Russia currently occupies. That seems to have been retracted now. Why do you think that Donald Trump and his envoys have made this huge change in this peace proposal?
Well, I think it's because they're looking at this not from a principled long-term approach, but what's in it for me right now. There's no question that President Trump wants the Nobel Peace Prize, and he has campaigned for it. And that's his view of the way in which he will go down in history as a great man. And so this is a part of that push. Besides, it's no secret that the Trump organization, the Trump family, has had a business interest with Russia, particularly in contacts with Putin, and those are to be furthered too. I think that that's the immediate emphasis. I would give credit again for trying to stop the war, stop the killing, and to have some sort of ceasefire. But you have to look at a longer term approach. You have to look at principles of justice, non-interference in the affairs of other countries, all of those values which are enshrined in the United Nations Charter and have largely kept the peace for over 80 years. This is not the way forward, in my judgment, but we have to play the hand which is being dealt. And one would hope that there would be other great democracies like India, like those in Western Europe, Japan, and so forth, which will weigh in on this to try to have a peace which is durable and just.
Yes. Raymond, do stay with us. Thank you very much for your insight there. We move now to foreign policy to domestic, and Marjorie Taylor Greene has announced that she will resign from Congress, shocking many in the Republican Party. The Georgia Congresswoman, a close ally of US President Donald Trump, has been at the center of a public feud with him. In a recent video announcing her departure, Greene has explained her criticism of President Trump's policies, particularly on Epstein's documents and the impact of tariffs on voters. Moreover, in her resignation letter, Greene has defended her campaign to release the Epstein documents, emphasizing her commitment to justice for victims of sex trafficking. President Trump has responded to Greene's decision, calling it, quote, "great news for the country." This comes as after he had earlier called her a traitor and threatened to back another challenger in the upcoming election. According to reports, Greene is expected to leave the Congress on the 5th of January of next year. Raymond, there's something interesting happening in the conservative base, in the MAGA sphere, as we can call it. Seemingly these vocal critics of Donald Trump's, who were formerly supporters, are now going against his agenda. Now, we haven't mentioned it, but there's a movement called This America First, obviously previously coined by Donald Trump, and it's seeing an increase in these individuals who believe that Donald Trump and MAGA isn't putting that at the forefront of the agenda like they said they would. Could you tell us a little bit more about who Marjorie Taylor Greene is and why this might be a sort of catalyst in the moving forward of the American conservative movement?
Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene is a member of the House of Representatives representing a very conservative district in the state of Georgia, in the northern part of it. And she has been a leader in the whole MAGA, Make America Great Again, America First approach, really from the very start. And prior to President Trump being elected in his first term. So she has been very extreme in some of her views. She's subscribed to various theories which are very far out, QAnon and so forth. But she has been willing to stand up, since she's been elected to Congress, for the constitutional right, if you will, of the legislative branch to act as a control in the separation of powers which we have in the Constitution. This has not gone over well with President Trump. And her resignation, to me, shows that while there is a split in the MAGA movement, President Trump at the present time is in charge. She would have been opposed in a primary by a chosen person of President Trump. And whether she would have been nominated or not as a Republican to run again for Congress in 2026 is doubtful. And so what has happened, she has folded and given in rather than continue that fight. Particularly alarming is that she was saying that the
Yes.
House of Representatives should have stayed in session to deal with health care. And that was contrary to the approach of the Speaker, who is an adherent of the President. And so it shows that the march led by President Trump to a different form of government, that is an executive override of the legislature and even the judicial branch, continues. It's not complete at this point, and I believe there will be some turnaround in the midterms in 2026. But this resignation is symptomatic of the difficulty we have in
Yes.
shifting to an elected king sort of approach to government rather than checks and balances of the separation of power in the U.S. Constitution.
Raymond Vickery, as always, it's a pleasure to speak to you here on NewsX World. Thank you very much for taking the time and joining us. We now move on, and US President Donald Trump met with New York City Mayor-Elect Zohran Mamdani at the White House in what many expected to be a political showdown. Instead, the meeting turned warm and constructive, surprising observers. Despite campaign barbs, Mamdani having called Trump a fascist and Trump's team labeling him a communist, both men focused on their shared priority, addressing New York City's affordability crisis and cost of living challenges. Trump praised Mamdani as a great mayor and said he was confident he could do a very good job. Mamdani returned the compliments and highlighted their shared love for New York and Queens roots. They also discussed crime and federal immigration operations, with Trump saying he would feel safe in a Mamdani-led city. This friendly rapport could undercut Republican efforts to portray Mamdani as radical ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. We're now joined by David K. Johnston. He is an American author and he joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, David, for joining us. David, not quite the showdown we expected. Both have thrown insults at one another. However, when the two men met, it seemed to be quite warm. What were your thoughts on the meeting? Do you think Donald Trump actually was quite fond of Zohran Mamdani?
No, I think this was very revealing of the characters of both men and of the position Trump finds himself in. Donald has a long history of taking crystal clear waters and muddying them. And in his statements at the White House, he was trying to open up for himself an array of options for dealing with Mamdani in the future so that it would appeal to the MAGA base, would not enrage people he doesn't necessarily need to upset. A good example of this was in his January 6th talk to the crowd that then went and attacked the U.S. Capitol, where all the way through he said, you have to fight like hell. And then he said one time, now be peaceful. So, of course, he's always been able to say, well, I didn't promote anything but peace. And the same thing here with Mamdani. We'll see how long this bromance lasts, because it won't. It's just the nature of things. In the case of the mayor-elect, he has proven incredibly skillful and adept at winning people over, at persuading people who are critics to think of him differently, and he's quite charming. And in addition, he had going for him that the results of the elections, including for mayor of New York across the country, are very bad for the MAGA movement and for Trumpism. And the interior details of who voted, just beyond the gross vote counts, are deeply troubling Republicans. I think you'll see more people joining Marjorie Taylor Greene in deciding it's not worth it. We're going to be the minority party in 2027 and leaving office.
Yeah, and David, of course, do you think this friendliness undercuts Republican efforts to paint Mamdani as a radical ahead of the 2026 midterms?
Oh, I think he's seriously damaged, if not killed, any small prospect that Congresswoman Elise Stefanik had. She is the expected Republican candidate for governor of New York against Governor Kathy Hochul, a Democrat. And her big issue was we have this lunatic communist running New York City. That's just been taken away from her. And this is indicative of how Donald is not a strategic thinker. He thinks about Donald, not about the party, not about the country, not about you. He thinks about Donald.
Yes, David, do stay with us as we have further stories coming out of the United States. US President Donald Trump has announced the immediate termination of temporary protected status for Somali immigrants in Minnesota, a program that began in 1991 under George H.W. Bush. Trump cited alleged Somali gang activity and missing funds in the state, though he provided no evidence to support these claims. The TPS program protects foreign-born individuals who cannot safely return home due to conflict or natural disasters. Under the Biden administration, Somalis were eligible for TPS through to March the 17th of 2026. Most Somalis in Minnesota are US citizens, and only 705 Somali-born individuals nationwide currently hold TPS, according to the Congressional Research Service. Trump has described Minnesota as a hub of fraudulent money laundering activity, referencing unverified reports linking the Al-Shabaab militant group to fraud in the state. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has criticized the move, calling it a broad targeting of an entire community. Advocates warn the decision could disrupt families and harm legal immigrants. Now we move on, and the US Federal Aviation Administration has issued a warning to airlines about a potentially hazardous situation while flying over Venezuela. The FAA attributed this to the escalating security situation and increased military activity in and around Venezuela, which may pose risks to aircraft at all elevations. Recently, the US has conducted a significant military buildup in the Venezuela region, including the deployment of the Navy's largest aircraft carrier, several warships, and F-35 aircraft. The US government has also carried out military strikes against boats suspected of carrying drugs from Venezuela and other Latin American countries. Direct flights by US passenger or cargo carriers to Venezuela have now been suspended since 2019, but some US airlines still continue to fly over the country for routes to South America. Meanwhile, the FAA has stated that Venezuela's military exercises and the mobilization of thousands of military and reserve troops have raised concerns. While Venezuela has not shown an intent to target civil aviation, the country's advanced fighter aircraft and air defense systems present a low-altitude risk. David K. Johnston joins us once again. David, is this measure put in by the FAA? Is this warranted, given the current escalations in the region?
Well, yes, given that we have 16,000 American troops, the world's largest warship, the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier, there, and there are lots of indications the U.S. may invade Venezuela, even though there's no lawful authority to do so. There has to be a notice to airmen. That's what was sent out, NOTAM, notice to airmen, to stay out of that area at any altitude. And if you're flying from, say, Los Angeles to Sao Paulo or Rio de Janeiro or Buenos Aires, you would on many routes fly over Venezuelan airspace. So this is a warning to stay away from there. And commercial aircraft will adjust their flight plans to take that into account.
Yes, David K. Johnston, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to get your insight. Well, that's a wrap on America 360 for today. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.